All right, it is 6:35. I'll call this work session of the mayor and council to order. All members are present. We will review tonight's council agenda. We have an invocation, the announcements, the pledge to the flag. Under ceremonial matters, we do have a presentation to the Copeland family by Stat. I think Mayor Pro Tem Whistle will be presenting the check. We then have a proclamation recognizing the Gallup mother and daughter tonight for Amy's weekend. Has everybody signed that proclamation? We have the regular business meeting and public hearing minutes from June 11th and the minutes from June 18th for the special call meeting. Does anybody have any changes or corrections to be made to those meeting minutes? We'll have Cam Williamson from the ARC, the Atlanta Regional Commission, here tonight to give the public a presentation on the July 31st TIA vote, the T-SPLOST. That will be an information session only. It should last about 15 minutes. Does anybody have any questions about that? We'll then have reports from our Planning Commission chair and then from Mr. George from the Snellville Entrepreneur Council. We then have the consent agenda. Does anybody have any questions or objection to anything on the consent agenda? I will be removing the Planning Commission appointments nominations tonight. Those are not ready to go forward.
Mayor, I would ask that we remove the Board of Appeals nominations off the consent agenda and then split the question.
Well, it's a nomination as a slate that I've put on there. I'm nominating a slate of people, so it's not within your authority to split it. If you want to make that motion when we get out there to remove it from the consent agenda, then I'll recognize you for that, though. Any other objections to anything on the consent agenda? That will bring us into the public input under old business, public hearing, public input on operating the capital improvement budget for fiscal year 2013. And then the second reading on consideration action on ordinance for adoption of the operating and capital improvement budget for fiscal year 2013. I think you all saw my email. After reviewing the videotape, I made the decision that the motion was unclear and improper. As chair, I take responsibility for that. However, I believe on Robert's rules, you can invalidate a motion even if it's been passed and it becomes null and void. So I've asked that this be put back on the agenda for a second reading. I understand that some council members may object to that. If you want to do an amendment, then it needs to go on the agenda for a first reading and a second reading. But tonight we have a second reading on the outstanding budget.
I have a question on that Robert's rules of making the motion null and void. Is that a unilateral decision, or is that something that must be done by the body?
It's a decision by the chair.
It's a decision by the chair to make it null and void.
Any other questions or comments on the budget for fiscal year 2013? I think Jan emailed out, or the chief emailed out, a copy of what I believe were council's intentions in trying to make on the June 29th budget. Does anybody have any questions or any changes to those?
That's exactly what we're trying to, we're attempting to have occur.
I think we're all in agreement on it.
Then at the appropriate time, what would need to occur would be a motion to approve the operating budget for fiscal year 2013. It's still not the budget that we had a first reading on, so the changes would need to be read into the record, and if someone wanted to make mention to a written document as an exhibit, you can refer to that. But because we didn't have a first reading on this budget, what we're changing from the first reading needs to be read into the record.
We have the changes, or can we just reference the new document?
Either you need to put the changes in the record, or you need to tender the new document into the record.
We just tender the document into the record.
Okay.
The main part of the budget adoption process is the key language of the resolution. It's not, we've been talking about a document that has some recitals in it, how you're cross-referencing what happened on the 29th. The key ingredient to adopting a budget is what happens after the be it ordained section. And there are a couple of necessities, and that is that you clearly adopt a document that staff can understand, which is the Exhibit A to whichever version you use. The second part that's required by law is the second paragraph of that gives the control to adjusting the budget numbers and moving them within the department at the control level being the city manager. So those things are necessities of the budget. The rest of it is flowery language that either version you pick is really pretty simple. But those two steps are critical in the adoption, in the budget adoption process.
Is it this one?
That one is the one with the yellow one is the last version I drafted, and it has a couple of recital changes. And it's, the issue that's been raised is one of the precision of what happened on the 29th in the adoption process. And so we're describing two different ways what happened on the 29th. And one of them says that there was a budget adopted, which clearly council's intent. They voted to adopt a budget. And then there's I think the confusion comes in that some members of mayor and council didn't really understand that all the funds were included, and that it was a comprehensive document. I think there was some discussion that was done in the meeting that basically said staff thought that the document that was on the table at the time had some errors in it. And so what the document that you have in front of you, the attachment, is one that staff has signed off on and reviewed. And Mr. Witt has reviewed and found it to be his intent in making action on the 29th. So the first part of the recital part is really always not critical language. It's not part of the action. It's trying to describe where we are. The ingredient that I'm mindful of is to incorporate. There was an intent to adopt a budget by the council by their action on the 29th, which is important from an advertising and notification to public. And so we didn't want to, that was the intent. It was perfectly executed in that way. There was a meeting, it was an open discussion, and so action was taken. Now, there was a question raised, and in my view, when you get a question raised, regardless of how it is, and we don't have to suffer under confusion, we can all agree, which we have all agreed. The good thing is we have a budget that everybody agreed on, including staff. And so it's just affirming that in the final document form is what really the council needs to do. So those are sort of the legal parameters of what you need to do. The recital part of it is insignificant to me and to you, to be honest.
For my edification, what document did we approve last time for the budget?
I wasn't here, so I'm a little bit at a disadvantage, but there, you guys were looking at, I think y'all had narrowed it down to two sets of documents that you were actually looking at.
Basically, when I asked for the amendments, I recited exactly what amendments I wanted made, and I think there was a total of 6. The others were very insignificant and could have stayed, the original document could have stood as it was. My whole purpose was to make sure that the $426,000 that was being put into 2013 budget and taxable was removed because we had the money in surplus funds. And the $16,900 for the pavilion repair was taken out of the taxable 2013 budget because we already received the money from an insurance company. It was sitting in our balance, and why should we tax the taxpayers for it when we've already been paid for it? And the third line item was the fact that there was a $99,000 fund transfer into the stormwater fee that absolutely did not need to, had no idea why it was there. No one explained to me what all of a sudden showed up. I wanted that removed. Basically, those were the only things that were of any consequence in this budget, and those were line item amendments. It was just that simple.
It wasn't that simple, and those weren't the only things of consequence, because I went through and asked you several changes that were made, and if those were your intent to make those changes, and you said yes. If you want to go back and play the videotape, I'll be happy to do that, but they did have a consequence because they cut staff salaries. They also left out things, and so, I mean, we can sit there and go back and forth all day over this, but the bottom line
Staff
is,
salaries, can we just bring that up? The staff salaries were not explained properly.
Okay, but we had this budget, we received these budgets March 5th from
I
Mr.
understand
Treadway. We received these changes at 4:48 on Friday afternoon from Mayor Pro Tem
You
Woods.
did
And
not.
Yes, I pulled up the email, I
You
received
did
these
not.
changes,
You
the
received them
latest
on
budget
Thursday.
change, no, sir. You
There
sent
was
out,
two minor
you
things.
sent out an amended budget at 4:48 on Friday for a 7 o'clock meeting. So the
You know
staff
what they were,
questions,
Mayor.
the staff questions, you had time to go back and answer them.
Well-
So this is something that I think, I understand what your intention was, but that's not what was said at the meeting. So you can
No, that's
intend
what
and
I
you can
said.
be, no, sir, what you intend and what you actually said are two different things.
No, what I actually said were those changes that I wanted. Then you started billing me about other,
Because those were in the budget
cross-examining about
document
these
that you
other
passed
things.
around.
Are we gonna accomplish anything by talking about this?
Yeah,
Can we
no.
just move on
Just move
and
on.
we
Well,
got a
I'm saying, if
budget?
you wanna throw stones, then I'm gonna throw stones right back.
I'm not
But
throwing
what's in
any
your
stones.
best
I'm saying
interest,
stones.
Let's move on.
you're saying what's inconsequential, but it was consequential, otherwise we wouldn't be here tonight. So if you wanna downplay what happened, then we'll discuss it.
repeatedly
But if
said-
you all just wanna move forward and what's done best for the city, then we'll move forward. But if you wanna go back and forth like we did in emails, Mayor Pro Tem Woods, I'm happy to do that on the record with you all night long. Moving on then to the resolution and setting the 2012 property tax millage rate. Our current millage rate is at 5.7 mils. I believe in the budget we had proposed from staff, it brought it down to 5.45 mils. I understand with the projected tax revenue that was projected in Mayor Pro Tem Wood's budget, that would bring it down to 5 mils. Is that everyone's expectations for tonight, 5 mils? Any questions or any discussion on the property tax millage rate?
We have until,
Tomorrow morning, documents have to be signed tonight. We then have the first reading on CUP 12-03. This is the Hampton Ridge Community Living Arrangement. We've received several emails on this. I think all of you were copied on those emails. Know that there are several people that are expected to be at the meeting tonight for this, so I ask that it not be on the consent agenda, that it be under the public hearing. I do plan on allowing those people to make comment if they want to be on the record with this tonight. I know it is a first reading, but if the public wants to speak on it, I'm going to allow them to speak. So.
I am going to recuse myself on this question because it's in my neighborhood.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else? With the first reading CUP 1203. Moving on then, we have consideration on the TIA projects. We received the list at the last work session from Mr. Davis. I haven't seen any response from anybody. That list has already been turned into the county. We just need to approve it unless anyone has any changes. It doesn't mean that we are bound to those projects on that list, but it gives us a starting point for discussion purposes. If anyone asks what the city is looking at as far as the vote on July 31st, it will give us a preliminary list.
Mr. Davis in here, did I see him?
yeah, he just.
He stepped out. Do you have a question?
Well, are we still working off the project group 41912 with the first
There should have been 4 projects on it.
tree lane, Ronald Reagan, Wisteria, Skyline, US 78, Scenic Highway, Town Center, Streetscapes, and Road Resurfacing? Is that the list we're working off of?
Yes.
That's the one I got in the package.
We've had it several different meetings. I don't believe anybody's made any changes to it. We then have the community garden fence. I believe those contracts have come back to you.
Actually, I don't really have anything in here, but we did receive the bids.
Billy?
Okay, we received bids and breaking down the recommended contractor based on the references in the submittals from Severe Enterprises. They've got a price for $24,293, and they had originally proposed $31,293, but they had priced 12 stone columns. They're only recommending putting in 5, so that reduces their contract by $7,000. Now, this project was bid in with basically 5 different elements, and so it's sort of a pick and choose. You know, that was the way I think Mr. Witt, you directed us to do it. because you were talking about certain possibilities.
Well, I'm not sure what the $24,000 represents. I mean,
There's a breakdown attached to the agenda item, which shows specifically the individual elements, the way we price it, or the way we.
and what is the $24,000 include?
24,000 includes everything, one cost to them.
Okay, but
Single point
I guess my point is this. One bid showed the chain link fence down Marigold, and then the chain link fence across is it Sawyer?
No, on Sawyer, we had decorative fencing. Marigold, on Sawyer and the parking lot side, we had decorative fencing.
Right, and that's my question. I think that originally, all we really wanted was the decorative fencing across the front we wanted the decorative fencing across the front of it. This along Marigold, or Sawyer here, could be chain link, as long as, which I think really could be just repaired. Basically, we just wanted to make sure that we had a decorative fencing across the front. Am I correct with that? Decorative fencing across the front?
I think we hope
Yeah, but I mean, at $24,000, we have to reconsider that. But if we have it across the front at least, you know, with the rest of it, chain link, we would have, then we can always go back in the future and put decorative across Sawyer. We would have the decorative all the way across.
Long story short, we've got unit prices for each of those elements, so however you want the structure to be,
That's fine.
you just need direction.
Any other questions about the fence? The stormwater drainage projects, those are gonna be postponed, is that correct? So if I can have a
We'll do
motion
them all
to-
together with the next set of projects. As soon as we get easements back from the residents, we're ready to go, but we're waiting on easements to be turned in.
So we wanna postpone those to our next meeting, or?
No, just postpone them or take them off the
Okay.
whatever. I don't know the legal thing that you need to do, but we want to include them on the next set of projects. But until we get all easements from residents, we don't want to even go out to bid because there's no sense in just delaying our contractors if we don't have easements from them.
And the issue was, I think in its original form, was we were trying to go back and use bid documents that were done more than a year ago.
Mhm.
And that caused me concern that we needed to rebid the process.
So if I can have a motion when we get to that item to postpone indefinitely. D, consideration